Hello and welcome to the Categorically Romance podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Bree.
And today we have joining us Harlequin Editor John Jacobson. John, it is so glad to have you. We're so glad to have you back. This is such an exciting episode that we're recording. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to be back and have actual things to talk about. Yay!
Tell us all the things that you can tell us.
Of course. Oh my gosh. So by the time this episode releases, if everything has gone according to plan with Harlequin, which it should, it'll be announced that the new sexy contemporary line that we've been teasing for a while is real. It has a name. The name that we have gone with is Afterglow. So it's officially like Afterglow Books by Harlequin. So and we went with that name because we talked, obviously naming a line is kind of the hardest part about making a line for Harlequin, partially because we've had a number of lines over the years, right? So there were things where it's like, could we do it? Oh wait, no, we've done it before, right? And because like the line names have all been very like snappy and direct and action oriented, right? Like it's like you're like, okay, so we can't use those. And of course, there's other copyright issues to consider in publishing because no idea is a new idea.
So sorry, Aaron, it's not going to be Temptation.
It's not Temptation again, no. Although Temptation was a great name. Yeah, I think we wanted to do something that still spoke to the high heat element a little bit, but really wasn't focusing on it because I think, and this is my personal feeling, is that like I love Temptation, I love Blaze, I love Dare, like I love all of those lines in their names. But they do kind of put the hook of the line on the sensuality and the heat. And while this line is high heat, that's not the central point of the narratives, right? Like it's not like each book is like starting with the sexy times and it's like a very consistent arc for each one. It's like it's much more individualized. So we wanted something that kind of spoke more to like the feeling, right? So Afterglow, it's kind of this like it's feeling that you're looking at like a sunset and golden hour, right? It's like the lingering positive experience that you have after a really great day or moment. And we felt like
really
that
great
just
something.
Like we felt like that meant something and it captures something, especially for this kind of like younger audience who's diving into romance and discovering it. And, and that's the feeling that it's a feeling that we want every Harlequin book to bring out, but I think the books in this line in particular are ones that speak to that. So yeah, we're really excited about it. It's really fun to finally be able to name it and not just call it New Sexy Contemporary, which doesn't have the same ring to it.
What did the meetings look like? Were y'all just like sitting around a table throwing out names and like, nope.
I there were definitely a lot of Word docs and brainstorms and like this, but not that, and this, but not that. And
because it's so important, right? Like you think of Blaze, it fit. You think of Dare, it fit. Presents is presents. So I can imagine how hard that was.
Yeah, it was really tough. And, and the thing is like, it's just like you think it's like, you're like, it's one word, like it has to be somewhat simple, but in some ways that makes it extremely difficult, right? Because like everyone has like really specific emotional connotations to words. And, when you're in these kind of large meetings, right, it's very easy for everyone has like a different way of thinking about the word. So they'll be like, well, this makes me think of this or this or this. And, it's like suddenly your giant brainstormed list, like is just everything is kind of problematic or like everything is variant. And, you have to try to figure out what somehow like balances all of these tightropes at once. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's like naming a baby, but instead of 1 to 2 people involved, how many people were involved in the name decision?
I don't remember the exact number, but it's, it ends up being quite a lot once you consider all of the, just everyone that is involved, from sales to marketing to leadership, right? Like we have a core team of people that are working on the product line, but really, right, like there are a lot of people who have to be able to support it for obvious reasons, right? So it and everyone's opinion has validity, right? Like we have people in Harlequin who have been at the company for over like 30 years, right? Like we have people that have seen so many different lines and understand the market in really special, unique ways. So, it's like we have to think about like not just the people that we want to bring in, but the like Harlequin consumer that's still with us and has been with us for a long time. And so it takes a lot. It takes a lot to really put that all together and figure out something that we can stand behind. So, this was the result, which I mean, our team is really excited about. I think we feel like it's exactly the right name that we needed.
Like, tell us the moment. Was it one of the editors or someone that came up with it? Like, do you remember that moment when you realized like, oh, we found it?
It was actually funny because it was one of the people on the team, Sarah, had the name on on the bottom of one of the lists, and then I hadn't seen it, so I also put it on one of my lists. And then when we were talking about it, it was like, oh, like we both like had come to that word, and then we all just got really excited about it. So but I mean, it feels like it's such a group effort, right? Because like it took a lot of brainstorming to get there. So it's just like, I don't think like Stacy and Erin and Catherine, who are all part of editorial, who also were there, right? And Shauna, like all these people that like are working on this were kind of it all built, you know what I mean? Like, so it does feel like it's a collectively owned experience. I think Sarah and I just happened to distill it out of like the sludge of our brains after so much brainstorming.
Just so, because it's gonna bother me, I have to know. Like, can you tell us any of the names that didn't make it?
I honestly, I'm like blanking on them right now, but there were, I mean, it was just like every version of like spicy, fiery, like, I mean, we certainly went down like those routes, and we went down like abstract routes, like wildflower and flower names. Like, it's just, we really like ran the gamut, because like, because it's such a new and it's such a different way of doing something like this from what Harlequin's done, as you'll learn about. Like we kind of had like a crossroads there as well, right? Is like, do we name it the way that we've traditionally named a lot of our lines, or do we name it something that's like maybe slightly more abstract or like slightly more individual? And I think like that was also part of it too, is like it wasn't like, okay, like we're doing it the same way we've always done it, like we're working in this structure, right? So there was kind of a lot more wiggle room. So definitely not everything was a winner, but and some things were surprises as far as like why they didn't work. But it worked out.
Well, the more that I go to Walmart faithfully and I always check the Harlequins, there's still so many readers that shop there, and I've really, I guess, come to understand how much y'all have to take them into consideration too. Like, a lot of readers do shop at Walmart, and we want to see the books on shelf at Walmart. So Afterglow, I feel like I will see that on the shelf at my Walmart potentially, hopefully.
I hope so. I mean, I think it's definitely something where the Harlequin reader who goes to Walmart will certainly see it. And, I mean, we're also hoping that it'll be in other spaces. Like, I think, we'll talk about this with like format and price, but it's very different from the rest of the lines in that way. But we've decided to make the changes that we have in order to make it more widely accessible, like to make the potential stronger, right? For just getting it in front of readers. So it's like, you will also see these books at Barnes and Noble, like your indie bookstore can also order them, and then not just in like special ordering, right? But like just to get them the way they would any other kind of standard paperback. And I think that's really exciting too, because it's like, of course, the traditional Harlequin readership is vital, right? It's important. But it's also important to have new folks, because that's the joy of sharing romance, right? Is that like we continue to bring people along for the journey and make them realize how special it is. So I think like that's really exciting as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing them in person.
Well, can you share with us some of the changes? What's different about this line that's going to be different from what we already have?
Okay, so I mean, I guess I'll start with like what's similar is that because it's somewhat easier to say what's similar. I feel like because it's a lot's different. So it's still the core kind of category romance experience in the sense, right, that these are shorter. They are about like 65 to like 72 or 73,000 words, right? So they're below like kind of a standard single title, like long romance novel length. It's still happily ever after, happy for now. It's still romance first, right? Like this isn't a line that is going to like transition into like, is it romance or women's fiction or anything like that, right? Like we're very much staying in what Harlequin does well, right? And it still has all of the feelings, that the tight editorial, like the unique voices, like diversity, like all of that is still there. And I think like that's where it and it's still affordable. It's still like something like that as a category product. But it's also different. So, I mean, the biggest changes are that it's like a hybrid semi-trade paperback rather than a mass market or a mass market max, which is not what we expected, I think, at first. But, the publishing industry has just had a lot of changes. Like the economy has been having a lot of changes. There's a lot of discussions around not just like the cost of what it takes to print books, but also, as you've seen, right, like even Walmart is, and all these other distributors are changing, I think, how they feel about different book formats and like what it means for their consumer. So we wanted something that like is meeting this reader where they're at, right? Which is like they're picking up these trade romances, they're picking up these paperbacks that kind of have a little bit more space to showcase like a cover and a story. But even though we're doing that, we're still doing it in a category way. So the price USD is, I think, like $12.99. So It's actually like compared to the $17 to $18 price point, it's still actually quite accessible, which is something that we felt very, impassioned about, because that's part of why category romance was so exciting, right? Is that if you're an avid reader, like you can buy more than one of them at a time and you're not like suddenly spending tons of money on these new books and these new voices that you might not know yet. And the covers are also different. So we're kind of taking a very different cover approach where we're doing a lot of different cover styles. There's not really kind of one unifying style or space the way that our other lines have, right? Where it's like all photographic. We're experimenting with illustrated, with typography first, with like mixtures of photorealism and like designed elements. And it's definitely to meet these readers where they're at again. But I think we're also trying to find ways to do it that still signals like the sexiness, that still signals that it's like very romantic, right? Like finding a way to make it Harlequin, a way to make it category while still like making it really different. So I think for avid Harlequin readers, it's going to be a big change, right? I mean, the price is a change, the format's a change, like the editorial is a change. Like it is quite different, but at the same time, like I think it's a natural evolution of where not just romance readers and the romance market is going, but I think also our writers. And I think we're really excited to just give our writers the chance to just, I think like they have a really huge playground with this line, and it's been exceedingly fun to see how they like take it and make it their own.
That's great. So when you say the covers are doing a different thing, are people going to see these and be able to say, oh, that's an Afterglow?
I think they will be able to see a similar perspective, but it's not going to be like, it's not going to be like our other lines where Afterglow is kind of on the cover and it's going to be like a really, it's not, you're not going to look at it and see the imprint / line name first, right? You're really going to like just see the book for what it is. And I think that's because readers, at least more readers now, I think want this sense of individualism with these books, right? Like it's like having the editorial consistency is really important, but they also still want to feel like each is its like individual experience, and like that they're not so similar. So we wanted to make sure that shone through. But we do have like the name and Harlequin on the spine. And the spines also have this kind of really cool hidden element where like when you put them together, like it looks like there's like a little sun on each spine design at the top, and then when you put them together, the rays actually come together in an accidental heart, which like was not intentional, but it just kind of perfectly encapsulated what we feel. So, you know, they'll still like, they'll look Afterglow if they're spine out on your shelf, and they'll have like a really clear, I think they're very like bright, they're very exciting, but still romantic. Which I think fits the name and the overall feeling that we're going for. So hopefully people will come to recognize them, but I think that that's something that happens over time, right?
Yeah. I've thought a lot about like how, you know, romance is constantly evolving, and like how we want to see, I mean, category has to kind of catch up, you know, stay with the times too and evolve with the times. And I think that's why I'm really excited to see like what we get with this new line. But for you as an editor and as someone like working on the books and excited for the line as well, um, I guess I also think about, I guess like what between now and the time that it comes out, because you want that reach for new readers, but you also, for you as an editor, do you also want to keep Harlequin readers on board? Like I'm sure you do, right? We want to keep what we already have on board. How do we convince them to stick with us with this? Because it does sound really different, and it sound like I'm excited because we've when we talked last time, you shared some of the authors and like what they're writing, and it doesn't sound the same, you know, which is exciting. But for old OG like hardcore category readers, they're like, I come to presents because I want this. I go to medical because I want this. Like, how do we get them on board with this?
I think that's a great question. It is. I mean, it's something like we think about it all the time. Like if anyone is listening to this and you're like, I am an OG Harlequin reader and like I am resistant to change, or I just like love this, like we think about it all the time, right? Because like it's like we always need to bring as many people along as possible, right? And I mean it's a change, right? And change is hard.
I'm sure Blaze was a change.
Yeah, no. I mean, and I would say part of it is that, like, I think if you've been with Harlequin for a while, and maybe, like, especially if you're a kind of reader that did love Blaze or Temptation or Dare or Kiss, or even super romance, like, I think that this line actually takes a lot of, I think, inspiration and I think a lot of the same joyful elements that readers liked from all of those classic lines, and it just puts them right in like what Harlequin has always done, right? Which is like when we do a line that is contemporary romance, like we do want that contemporary romance to feel contemporary, right? Like so it is taking those elements from the lines that you have already enjoyed, and it's just finding a way to translate them into what's going on today, right? And like what people are concerned with now. And also that like, even though this is a line that has the younger reader in mind, it's also a line that has, like, we have a lot of characters in books coming up that are actually not that young. Like two books that I'm working on, Adele Buck's Fake Flame and A.H. Cunningham's Out of Office, both have characters in their late 30s to 40s. And we have other characters like that coming down the pipeline. So awesome. it's interesting. Like it definitely is, it has that young feeling, but I think it's a really wide line. And I think that readers that are like looking for that OG Harlequin will find the core of it here. But also like we have a lot of OG Harlequin folks that are writing for the line. Like I think in the first like 5 months, like we have Catherine Garbera, we have Stacey Kennedy, we have Yara St. John, we have Karen Booth, you know, we have so many more. We have folks like Donna Hill, like we have.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like we like, I mean, you know, not everyone, like there's also a lot of new authors, you know, I don't want folks to like, it's not like we're just kind of taking everyone and just plopping them in, like it's, but there's so many authors that were writing for us that really like, you know, like they had voices that spoke to this. And, you know, we felt like that was really important to make sure that we brought along as many Harlequin authors as we could from to this new space. And it's like a space where we'll continue to do it because that's what we like to do, right? Like Harlequin we like to keep our authors with us. Like we know they have readers and fans and they're so great at what they do, right? So I think like if anything, it's like especially if you were a fan of like Desire or any of those older lines and you're like, oh, I love those classic Harlequin voices, like this is just a chance to get to see them with like a little bit more word count and a little bit more of adventure, right? Like they're not tied down to billionaires or, you know, they don't have to write a ton of cowboys or whatever, right? Like this is just more broad. Yeah. And I think that opens up so many fun possibilities for readers.
I hope you'll still be working with Catherine Garbera. Like I was chatting with Erin before we hopped on and I'm like, her last 2 series have been so good. And I mean, she's just like in her element, I feel like.
I love Kathy. No, yeah, she her book is coming out in January and it's titled The Bookbinder's Guide to Love, and it's about like a heroine who she makes her own journals, and she and 2 of her friends like run an occult shop together. So her one friend is a tarot reader, her other friend runs a tea shop, and they kind of get really successful after a celebrity uses their services. And it ends up being kind of this like enemies to lovers like inheritance story when she inherits some old books from an old gentleman that she became very close friends with, and his grandson comes knocking. It's really good, you know. And I mean, she's a great example. Like her voice is so classic. When you read this book, it's gonna feel like everything you love about Kathy Garbera. It's just like Kathy Garbera with like the world as her oyster in terms of what the contemporary title can be, right?
She's been showing out lately. Oh, Miss Kathy. So,
well, I'm glad.
What's the subscription going to look like for it? Since it is a little bit more in the stores, are we going to be able to subscribe to it? And is that going to be a little bit more than like if you're subscribed to romance or something?
That's a good question. Honestly, it's not something that I think we've fully figured out yet, but I mean, it's obviously direct to consumer is a huge part of Harlequin. We're thinking about it. We're going to be able to access it. I think we're just figuring out exactly what that looks like because it is a bit different. Yeah. You know, and when I say that it might look a bit different, you know, it's still something that I think we're determining. I mean, there's also just so much going on in that space outside of Harlequin too, that it's like with a new line, you know, it opens up just a lot of questions about how it goes. But yeah, no, it'll be available on Harlequin's website as well, right? Like these are still Harlequin category romance books in a lot of ways. They just happen to look different and, you know, be doing something a little bit different.
So with the covers, because we know like the authors, they kind of send it to you like, you know, a scene or whatever for the art department. Is with the covers being different, with y'all being experimental with that, like, is that still going to be kind of the process? Like the author kind of sends something to you guys or to the art department, and it's just kind of like case by case basis?
The authors still have like their process in terms of giving us as much information as they can about like the book and scenes and characters, and we do bring that into the art process, but it does look different, right? Because they're all in a different style. Like so many, like the conversations are kind of a lot more exploratory. It's, you know, we have to think about like, okay, like will this work with an illustrated cover? Will this work better as like title first? You know, do we want something that is, you know, very like rom-com-y and cartoony, or do we want it to be hyper realistic? Like, do we want to take a risk and go with somebody that maybe hasn't done a lot of book covers, or somebody that maybe has done quite a few covers and we know has a certain style? Like, so there's a lot of that conversation is so much more, I think, about the full vibe of like the author and the book, right? Like with Kathy, we wanted something that was like witchy and almost has kind of like a tarot card design to it. Versus like you'll see like the Timothy Janofsky cover for January is like this very big, bright, bold, fun kind of situation. Oh, you know, Yara's has these like kind of beautiful, warm tones and like focuses on the characters and the movement. And then Stacy's has this kind of edge and this like neon moment, right? So it's like we really wanted to like it's fun because like it kind of takes more, to be honest, but I think the result is exciting, and it's fun to be able to give the authors, I think especially for our authors that have been with us a long time, right, just the chance to like see what other kind of ways their books can be packaged, right? Because like Harlequin's consistency is really wonderful. It just, you know, it's like if you've written like 100 books for us, right? Like it's kind of like, you know, it's going to happen. So there's something really fun about not knowing what you're going to get in some capacity, right? Or like having it just be something that's more tailored to like the book and your voice. You know, I mean, and they're all of our covers are tailored in that way, but I think just having something where it's like every aesthetic is moving in that direction, right? It's fun, but yeah, it is different, and it's been a learning process, but I think the results speak positively of what we've been able to do with it. So. Mm-hmm.
And I know this is something that's going to take time, but like, what are your thoughts as someone that reads romance and works with romance and is on social media? What do we do to get the younger reader that may be new to romance or maybe already has been reading romance but never read a category? How do we reach them? How do we encourage them, inspire them to give these a try?
That's a good question. I mean, I think people talking about them and posting about them and just, I think, engaging with them authentically is always really good, you know, on whatever social media platforms you just like to engage with organically in that way. You know, I think the hope is right that readers will be able to see these and discover these in new ways, right? So I think focusing less on them as category books in terms of like selling it in by the category. And I think more like starting off with like, would we see that individual people are asking for certain types of books? Like Afterglow is ideally the line where there is something for everybody because it's so broad, right? Mm-hmm. It's like you have queer romances and straight romances. You have romances from authors of various like backgrounds and demographics. You know, you have stories that are everything from like city stories to small towns, celeb to like very working class, right? Like comedy to angst. Like, so it's like, it's a nice wide breadth. So I think the best way to get people on board, right, is to just see what they're reading and then, you know, I think find what is within this line, right, that like speaks to that, and shows them, I think, that Harlequin has this range that I don't think is always like, you know, it's the downside of like our great branding, right? It's great branding and I really love it. And obviously I have, because like I've been reading Harlequin since I was like a babe, but you know, it's so consistent that I think it can sometimes, for newer readers, like it's hard for them to just pinpoint from just looking at what we have, right? Like, oh, but like this is a really wide array of things. Yeah. And I think this line just kind of takes that and it like notches it up a couple of levels. And that's like, it's going to be fun to just do that. And I think hopefully if they read a couple, right, it's like then the goal is that like they'll start pursuing it more, and seeing it organically as something that is special and speaking to them. You know, and the price point doesn't hurt either. Like I think if we're recommending books to people and trying to get them to try it, it's like nice that you can go to Walmart and it will be like $13 versus like $20, right? Like, yeah. So, you know, that $7 makes a difference for those of us that, that live on fixed incomes.
Now, I don't want to use the word trickery or anything like that, but with the new cover designs and things like that, there are some established romance readers that haven't gotten into category that I hear the story of, well, I went to the category romance section of my used bookstore. There were just all sorts of colors, all sorts of books, just shelves packed to the gills. I didn't know where to start, so I walked away. Is that element not going to be there with this line, do you feel?
I mean, I think that these books will have a little bit more to stand out with individually, right? I mean, part of it is the trade format does like lend itself a little bit better just to shelving, right? And to notice, right? They're a little larger. They'll still be thin. Like it's still a shorter book, but that will help. And also like the spine colors are going to match the actual covers. So it's like, it's not like a consistent spine color. We're not numbering them. So I do think they're going to stand out more as being from the same place, but not necessarily being easy to kind of like, you know, the downside of when you look at like, especially like a large stack of like books from one line, like this happens to me when I go into the Harlequin office, right? Is like, if you're looking at it from far away, it can become just like one flock of color.
I would
And
pass out, okay, if
and
I
it's
ever
like,
walked into the Harlequin office and
I
saw a
mean, and
stack.
it's beautiful. And like, as a nerd, I'm so into it. And I think so many readers, like, there is this like breathlessness when you, especially if it's like an old line or something and you see all of them, right? Like, but I think for somebody that doesn't have that experience, right, it's a very different mode of thinking. So, you know, it's not like we're trying to just like, we're not trying to like take what that joyful experience of
course not,
away from the readers that understand it. It's more that this is just kind of like a nice entry point into that, right? And I do think it's an entry point because like so much of what readers are liking in romance right now is not just an Afterglow, right? I mean, like people are like small town romance is having a resurgence again, and it's like go to like, it's like special edition and heartwarming and love inspired are like right there, like ready, like, you know, like people are loving romantic suspense elements again, and it's like you have intrigue and RS and love inspired suspense, and like the historical line's beautiful, and it's like, it's definitely like, I feel like it's nice because like it's a little bit more accessible to that reader, but I do think that the goal is that like it's only the beginning in terms of that relationship, right, with like what else is out there.
So this may be all like sales stuff, but I was wondering, I was like, okay, so what's the shelf life going to be? Because I was thinking we were going to get 4 books, but we're getting 2. So is it still a month, like shelf life? And is that kind of all in account of like it's going to cost a little bit more? We don't want to put 4 out there at that price. Like, how did y'all come to like that decision?
So the hope is that, and I don't know if this is guaranteed, like this is a little like, this is like what we're hoping will happen, right, is that we'll have 2 months shelf life for these, right?
Okay.
Because like, you know, with normally, right, the lines are 4 to 6, so it's like, oh, like January will come out, we'll have the 2 January books, and then like February comes out, and then you'll have the January and the February, and then once March comes out, you'll have February, March, right? So it's like and that would specifically be in spaces where, right, like we're like series as a whole, like Harlequin series is kind of in that kind of vibe, right? So like Walmart is a good example where, you know, they get changed out every month. But the thing about these being in this kind of hybrid trade format is like they actually don't have like a limited shelf life, right? Like we're not numbering them, we're not dating them, we're making them stand out. Like, so they can just be ordered by Barnes and Noble or your indie bookstore, and they could be on the shelf as long as they're selling, right? As long as they're available, which I think is really important because like, I mean, I love our category setup, but like every category reader knows that like it's like if you're interested in something but like you find out about it like way after it's come out, and like you're a print reader or you like just having the print book, right, it's like the accessibility can be a bit of a challenge. And I think it's like good that this kind of has the ability to, I think, stick where it needs to stick while also having a chance to kind of be spotlit in these, you know, kind of standard Harlequin areas as well. So it's like, it's even a hybrid in that way, right? Like it kind of does both, which I think is exciting and interesting, because that's actually not something that most books get, right? Like most trade books, like you start at 0 and you have to just sell them in individually. So it's nice that like we both have spaces that like will be guaranteed to have these at all times, as well as spaces that, you know, can pick and choose based on what interests them or what maybe fits their communities best. And, you know, I think that that's really exciting.
Well, I feel like I tend to think very North American. What about for our overseas friends? Like, what's the access look like for them?
I mean, that's still a conversation, right? A new line is a whole new thing to think about for every overseas pocket as
Because I
well.
know
So,
Argentatus in Brazil is like gonna be all over this, but I hope he can access them. And Sarah loves
I
Mills
mean,
and Boone in Australia. I hope she can access
I'm
them.
hoping so too. You know, I think it's going to look a little different everywhere. You know, I think it's just it's a lot of questioning, right? Because it is a new line, right? And
Yeah.
like we saw it with Dare, right? Where like Dare was mostly digital for most of its life, right? Like it's like sometimes it's a bit of a testing period. Sometimes it's also just a question of whether the market is doing the same kind of thing in that country as it is here. So like it's, you know, that's an ongoing conversation, but I'm hoping that it is able to go as wide as possible, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the dream. And I think the editorial is there. I think these are books that are big in a certain kind of way that will translate well, but you know, it's so that's like that it's so place specific, and like that's something that I've learned as like I've gotten to understand the international side of publishing better, is that like it is really different everywhere you go in a way that you don't expect.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I wanted to ask you next was being part of this process. How has that, I guess, helped you grow as an editor? Like being part of launching this new line and getting new authors and helping, OG authors shift over. Like how do you feel like you've grown as an editor?
I mean, I've definitely grown a lot. It was like, you know, let me tell you, they don't that this is an extremely rare experience to be editing in like a brand new line or imprint, like anywhere, like not just in Harlequin, but like anywhere, right? Like it's and I came in because I came in at the inception. Really, it was like feet to the fire really fast, but it's been so joyful. Like I loved getting to work on Classic Desire. I've loved getting to work with all of those authors, and I also it's just like it's been a joy to understand like Harlequin's roots, and also to understand how to like bring those to like a whole new set of people. So I feel like I've grown a lot in that way, where like I've just gotten to work on a wide variety of things, and it's honestly just been so, I find a lot of joy in the collaboration, because like each one of our authors is like so special and so talented, and they're all in their own like unique ways. So I just get to like soak up all of these different voices, right? Like I get to soak up like Kathy's like banter and sexiness, and then like Timothy like makes all these like amazing one-liners, and like all of the other authors that I work with like have their own thing. And you know, you grow so much as an editor just in like finding out how to like bring that specialness out of each person and each work. So, you know, but it's definitely been an extra bit of a challenge, but I like a challenge. I'm a Capricorn, I'm a cardinal sign. I gotta be moving. I gotta be starting stuff. So
So I guess I just have to ask, and you can totally tell me to fuck off, but I just have to know. Okay, so like we're getting this new line, but with the excitement of this new line coming, we're also losing a line. And I don't know if those two things go together at all, but with Desire, it is such a long running classic line. Just humor me. It wasn't an easy decision, was it? It
oh
wasn't an
my
easy
god,
decision.
no, never. Like I can't like one thing that like I learned coming in very early to Harlequin, which like I already knew from working as a freelancer with Karina and like getting to know some folks, but like it really hit home, is like every editor and employee, like we care about the lines and our authors like so much, because like that's always been a huge part of the experience, right? Like if you talk to authors that have written for us for a long time, right? Like so many people have that story of like, you know, especially because we work with a lot of folks that are unagented in a world that is very like literary agent driven and stuff, right? Like we do a lot of on the ground work with people, and like we invest so much time and energy into, you know, like making these books and to giving authors the chance to start their careers and to find new ways to write. And it was really hard. And we like, we're positioning this as like an evolution, right? In a way, like, it's not the same line. We know it's not the same. It's not going to look the same. It doesn't have the same components. But like, so many of the Desire voices are coming along. And I think that what people, like, the core of what people enjoyed about that classic line is going to be here as much as it can be. I mean, yeah, the wealth is dialed back, but also, like, we still have presents, like, we still have other things at Harlequin that I think fit that perspective and that fantasy. What we're really just trying to do is not only give our authors a chance, I think, to stretch and to write things that could be really different for them and for the world, right? But we also just want to give our readers the chance to, like, see themselves in what we're doing in a new way. And I think that's really the most important, right? It's like, but it's hard, right? Like, there's like, also, like, I love classic Desire. I love those stories. I love that voice, that writing, that fantasy. It's like, it's amazing. Like, every Desire book that I've worked on has been really special and memorable for me. And, it's hard. It's just, I think it's an evolution that we're hoping people will understand, even if it's painful and difficult in some ways. It's also joyful, and it's part of Harlequin, right? Is like, we have to represent and showcase the readers that we have, right? And like romance isn't romance if people don't feel like they can be part of that fantasy. And I think that's what it is, right? And not to say that Desire wasn't inclusive in its own way, right? And it's not. It is certainly inclusive. It's just that this is kind of a new opportunity, I think, to do more. And that's kind of what we're excited about, right? So, but I get it. Like, Desire is great. And,
I read a medical, and I was thinking of this person in my head. They're like, medical is very much just like presents. They're just medical professionals. And I was like, I don't think I've read a medical yet that somebody has a lot of money. There's always one character that has a lot, like, the wealth is there. Even in the medical line, we're not all billionaires, and the wealth isn't there for all of us. So I'm excited about that.
Exactly. And like, I mean, and of course, like, we have so many lines that kind of do that too in a different way, right? Like special edition and heartwarming and love inspired. Even with those lines, they're like, they're also, like, they're very small town driven. They're more family driven, right? Like, those stories often kind of play with these different ideas of kind of like, once you have an understanding of where you want to be settled and like where you want to have your community, and you're like, you're just like, all right, like, it's really just like everything else is kind of happening, and like the romance is this piece, right? So it's like, this is kind of that bridge, right, where it has this, like, it is down to earth, but it's still like exciting and interesting, right? Like, and it's not just like, and it's, the settings are really wide, so like, you kind of can get that feeling of self-discovery and self-acceptance and actualization, but just with a little bit more pomp and circumstance without having the wealth attached, right? So like Tim's book, The Fake Dating Game, is all about a character who he's basically like, he loves this show that's Supermarket Sweep or Supermarket
Oh my God.
And he would watch it with his mother, and they had like a really deep connection over it. And then 6 years before the story occurs, like, she unfortunately passes away. So then the character, like, in the present, wants to like audition for the show with his boyfriend, only for his boyfriend to dump him. And then he decides to go anyway and ends up fake dating somebody in order to try and get on the show. And of course, we know what happens when you fake date in a romance novel. And it's like, it's so fun because it's like, it's like, this character is in their early 20s. Like, they're old enough that they feel like an adult, but they're still very young. They're still figuring out a lot about, like, he's figuring out a lot about who he is, what's going on. The other hero is very similar, right? Like, they have some ability to like travel and do this exciting thing, but also they both like desperately need the prize money, and it would like change their lives forever. Like, right? Like, because they are not super rich already, right? Like, it's not just like a fun jaunt, but it like has real tension and stakes. And as a result, it's like super funny, but also really emotional, right? And it's like, you have enough conflict and tension because they're real, right? Like, because it's not like, that's the thing that I feel like I've learned the most throughout this line, is that like when you dial back wealth, like there's actually so much more room for conflict and tension that I think feels very organic to the romance, because like we often forget that like one reason why like presents can be such like this really big fairy tale fantasy, right, is that so many of the things that could be conflicts are taken out by the fact that one character is able to like resolve most of them very easily, right? And like that's why it's a great fantasy. But then like there's also something really romantic and special about like being able to find somebody in a situation where you can't like resolve those things, right, very easily, because like that's a lot of what we're experiencing today. And I think all of us kind of feel like we have these tensions about work or finances or family, and you know, we don't have the ability to maybe like pay for the best medical care or do the thing that would make us the most happy the most easily. And like we have to find a way to like find our happiness and selves within that. And like I think the idea of a romance existing within that space is just very interesting, and something that like it's like that's also a fantasy that we deserve, right? Like it's one that we deserve because like it's one that we could get in real life, as much as it's also one that like we get in like our brains and gives us like all of the joyous serotonin of romance.
So are you currently editing anything, or have recently edited it? I mean, you've mentioned Timothy. We talked Adele last time, and I'm going to be chatting with her this weekend. What else? We've chatted Miss Kathy Garbera.
Yeah,
What
so
else have you been working
Kathy and
on?
Tim are coming in January. I worked on the 2 books in March, which are The Boyfriend Subscription by Stephen Salvatore, which is
I love the title.
It's a great title, and it's a queer retelling of Pretty Woman, where the Richard Gere character is a sex worker who he is from a wealthy family, and he ends up striking out on his own as a sex worker, and makes like a sex work positive app where people can connect to each other or connect to like that in like a safe way. And then he ends up like fake dating like a down and out like husky plant influencer who had this plant account called Plant Daddy.
Oh my God.
This like fake dating situation because like he's trying to get an investor for a new project that like is queer but still kind of wants like to see a slightly more normative like relationship, right? And it's like very sexy and very funny. And then we have Carla de Guzman's Manila Takes Manhattan, which is about 2 Filipino characters, one who has lived in the United States for a while and is an actress on like a kind of sci-fi Game of Thrones style show that's gotten popular, and like a music producer who's coming to New York for the first time to work on a film that she's in, not realizing that she is the one who requested him because she's like a fan of his music. And they end up like being neighbors in the same kind of like studio housing and have a one-night stand before they fully realize who the other person is.
Oh, I love that setup.
And it's like super like poetic, but also really funny. And it's like imbibed with a lot of Tagalog, and it's like really beautiful. And then for April, we talked about Adele, and I also worked on the other book in that, which is called Out of Office by H. Cunningham. She writes also a lot of like Black like erotic romances, which are gorgeous. This is like still very sexy, but not overtly erotic. And it's about a woman who it works for like a hotel chain and that is just finishing setting up like a hotel in Panama. And throughout the months that she's been there, this man has basically like been her driver who's part of this cab service. And then she decides to like take a couple of weeks of sabbatical because she's like a chronic overworker, to like stay in the country for a little bit. And he offers up his family's like very small like motel / hostel, because they both have had a simmering attraction the whole time. And it ends up being like a really beautiful story about like, you know, really like what it happens when you're burnt out and like what the meaning of like work and happiness is. And it's really beautiful and angsty, and like they're all so good. I just happen to work on a lot of the books in here. But then like we also have Yara St. John's, which the frenemy fix up, which is like enemies to lovers, and it involves like yoga and like a hero that like was the hero basically is just trying to like go on like this like self like fixing journey, and the heroine is the one taking him on it through like this fitness stuff, and it's part of her Six of Gems series, which was part of Desire. So even though it's looks a little bit different, it still kind of has this connection to her Desire work. And then Stacey Kennedy has like a very classic sexy AF like cowboy romance about a group of women who start a bar in like this classic cowboy country, and like the tension between them starting the bar and like the cowboy hero. And you know, and those are both in February. So I mean, I think our starting lineup is like pretty legit. Yes. I'm excited about it. I think we have a lot. I think it's very different. We have some great stuff coming up too. Like we have a book by Paula Ottoni, which takes place, I think, in Copenhagen, and involves like a gamer, nerdy heroine and like a roommate situation. We have a book coming up by Carmen Lee, which is a Black Sapphic romance that's between two people who are coaching a high school bowling team. Like we have like a Romancing the Stone send up coming out that I'm editing right now. Like it's really fun. It's just like, I think the biggest thing is that every book is so fun. Like whether it's like a rom-com or whether it's more emotional or like something in between, it's just like fun. Like,
yeah. It sounds like we're getting more romantic comedies in this line, and I am here for that. Aaron, you love a rom-com too.
I do, yes.
Oh, yes.
Question, random.
No.
Are we done with continuities in this line?
I mean, I don't think that Harlequin will... I don't think that we've shut the door on that idea, but
okay.
I don't like, we're not planning on having a continuity for this line at this moment. Okay. You know, I think that from what I understand, like we have, you know, we will have continuities continuing to come out in other spaces. I think what's hard is like when I think about a continuity, like I don't think it would be able to look the way that it has for our other lines, the way that it would for this one. Partially just because when you're only releasing 2 books a month, I think that that's something where it's like, you know, do you want them to be that interconnected? And what's hard is like continuities are so interconnected, but these books really are more kind of standalone, even if they are part of a series within themselves. And, you know, so I doubt it's off the table. We just haven't talked about what that would look like or whether we would want to do it. But, you know, I would say never, right? Because Harlequin we always have things brewing, things are changing and evolving, and, you know, but
who knows? We may have an Afterglow Texas Cattlemen's Club.
I don't know how that would. I mean, I'm not going to say no. I don't
sexy know cowboys.
I mean, I think sexy cowboys are always in season. You know, never hurts to have another sexy cowboy out there.
So before we let you off of here, because you're a busy person. What have you been? Tell us what you've been, because you went on vacay. What have you been enjoying? Like when you're not working, what are you reading for, you know, I'm not working and I'm going to read for fun? Because we know you have fun reading for work. But like, what have you been reading, watching, consuming, taking care of yourself amidst all this craziness?
Yeah. Oh my God. While I was on vacation, I really thought I would be like glued to my Kindle. But thankfully, I ended up being very active for a lot of the day. So, I mean, for those... thankfully, who probably don't follow me on Instagram or social media, I went to Germany to visit my partner's family in Cologne, and we also saw Beyonce in Frankfurt. So, like, obviously, I listened to a lot of Beyonce, and it was amazing. It was astounding. It was the best experience. We had floor seats, so we were like really close to the stage. And I I've told people, I was like, if she had fallen on me when she was suspended in the air, I would have died happy. I would have been like, I'm okay going out like this. So, you know, and otherwise we did a lot of just sightseeing and food stuff. So that was really restorative. But I did read a lot while I could. Like, I'm a big reader on like transit, because like it's only been in the past few years that I've been able to like sleep on a plane or a bus, because like I'm very persnickety, I guess. But what I read I reread the first book in J.L. Seegers's New Haven series, I believe, which is like they're like these super like long, angsty, gorgeous, emotional Black romances. Like great if you love like Kennedy Ryan and just like lots of sexiness, but also just like this energy. That's like immediately the one that came to mind. I also read Hannah Bonham Young's Next of Kin, which is like a really beautiful contemporary romance about two older siblings who both want to like foster their younger siblings and get paired up together in order to be like financially and like kind of like, I guess, domestically capable of doing it for like the Child Protective Services, which is great, was really interesting. So I always try to read like current romance outside of Harlequin, like especially on my commutes to and from the office. I end up reading a lot of category. Like I've actually been reading a lot of like love inspired for some reason, which is like, it's great. It's a great line. It's just like, if you know me IRL, that's not the line you would like stamp on me, but it's very like calming, which
it is.
Really like. And otherwise, like I read a lot of manga. I also just read a lot of like broad lit fic. Like right now I'm reading Charlotte, I think McConaughey's Migrations, which is about a woman in the near future where a lot of animals have been extinct. And she's trying to track like the last migration of this group of the last Arctic terns in the world. So like I'm really kind of all over the place. Like I just, and then I'm binging Love Island right now. Because when I got back, I had a lot of episodes that I hadn't watched yet. So, you know, I would recommend anybody who's a romance fan, Love Island is a good time.
I need to jump on the Love Island train. I hear nothing but good things.
I mean, it's very fascinating. It's like, I mean, it's a microcosm, right? Like it's like literally you're seeing every day as it happens. So it's intriguing, and it's good if you're just like crap reality TV, which like I'm always a fan of.
So let's start with you. Where can everyone keep up with you? And then for anybody that's listening that's like, well, I have a story I want to submit, where should we be submitting for the new line?
Fabulous questions. I mean, if you wanna deal with me, you can find me on Twitter at fem_trash. You can also find me on Instagram at Boys and Monsters, although I'm probably going to try to change my handle because
I love your handle.
I know, but they're not connected at all. So
okay, you're right.
You know, I mean, branding, I don't know. I'm not an author. I don't know how to brand myself. And then if you're interested in submitting to the line, Harlequin Submittable has a new sexy contemporary. I mean, I hope the name may or may not be changed to the formal line name by the time this episode comes out. But if you see either Afterglow or new sexy contemporary on that Submittable, you can submit it there. You're also welcome to, of course, like reach out to any of the editors with questions. And hope when the episode comes out, like we'll also have a landing page up that'll have like editor bios with our pictures and like the name and like a bunch of other materials. So you'll probably also be able to find information there. You know, and yeah, and it's like not just if you're writing in this, but if you're writing anything that you think could be interesting and worthwhile for Harlequin, like please send it along. Please talk to us about it because like we're always trying to like try new things. And you know, I think that people always underestimate whether something could be like the right fit for us or not. And I think this line has like proven that, you know, like there's quite a lot of room in our beautiful little space for people.
The possibilities are beautiful.
Yes, no, and they're only gonna go up from here, I think. So I mean, fingers crossed, this is only the beginning of a very successful, wonderful project.
It's gonna be great. Well, thank you so much for sharing the deets with us, coming back on. Can you please come back, like, you know, January, February after the line's out so we can talk the books, please? By then we've had the opportunity to read them.
Like once you read them, I definitely want to talk about them because I'm so excited but also terrified of like in like the best possible way, right? Like as an editor, it's like it's not my book, so you wouldn't think that like but I feel like by the time my authors and I are done working, I'm like it's like it is not my baby, but it's like my god baby, right? Like I am still pretty
For NetGalley reviewers, do you know when they'll be up on NetGalley? Will they?
I'm sure that we've talked about that, but it is eluding my brain. But
Okay.
we will have e-copies up on NetGalley and I think Edelweiss. So we will have that opportunity. And there will be some exciting opportunities coming up. Like some folks might find that they get some chances to read things early. So, I'll leave it a little vague there, but we got some exciting stuff coming up to gear everyone up for it. So